The control panel fizzled, the warning lights flared, and all eyes turned to the human. He simply shrugged and said, "Whoops." The room fell silent. Then, chaos. The Xenovis was one of the most advanced research stations in the galaxy, orbiting a distant star beyond human reach. It was run by the Verka, an alien species known for their meticulousness and obsession with perfection. Everything on the station ran with absolute precision, until today. Aboard the station, a group of elite alien scientists studied various species across the galaxy, seeking to understand their psychological and physiological limits. Their latest subject, Ben Carter, the lone human engineer brought in to test humanity's ability to adapt to high-stress environments. And now, something had gone terribly wrong. The station's control panel, a massive interface regulating artificial gravity, power, and life support, had just short-circuited. Sparks flew, screens went black, and an ear-splitting alarm began blaring. Dr. Xyloth, the lead scientist, recoiled in horror, his scaled hands tightening around the data tablet. Catastrophic systems failure detected. Emergency override engaged. His voice was sharp, tense. The other Verka scientists scrambled in a panic, their sharp, clawed feet tapping against the metallic floors as they rushed to their designated emergency stations. But Ben? He just stood there, staring at the flickering screen with mild amusement. Then, he shrugged and muttered, "Whoops." Silence. Every alien in the room froze. Their large, lidless eyes fixated on the human, unblinking. To them, the gravity of the situation was apocalyptic. But the human? He looked bored. Dr. Xyloth's voice cracked as he spoke. Did you just say, "Whoops"? Ben sighed, rubbing his chin. Yep. That's a problem. Xyloth's frills flared in sheer terror. A problem? Human, we are experiencing a critical system failure. Do you comprehend what that means? The station's power could collapse. The gravity regulators are destabilizing. We could all be crushed, frozen, or thrown into the void. This is chaos. The other Verka hissed in agreement, their anxiety spiraling. Ben, however, scratched the back of his head and let out a low whistle. Yeah, I see how that could be bad. Xyloth gasped. Could be bad? A scientist screamed as a floating chair suddenly dropped to the ground. The artificial gravity was failing. Panic swept through the room like wildfire. Ben sighed again, reached into his tool belt, and pulled out a wrench. He kneeled by the control panel and tapped it a few times. Then, he twisted a loose bolt, reached behind a console, and, click. The alarms stopped. The lights flickered back to normal. The gravity stabilized. The station was fine. The room was dead silent. Every single Verka scientist stared at Ben as if he had just defied the laws of reality. Ben wiped some dust off his hands and stood up. Yeah. Just a loose connector. Should be fine now. The alien said nothing. Then, Dr. Xyloth took a step back. Humans are terrifying. Humans are terrifying. Dr. Xyloth's words hung in the air, a declaration of something far more profound than the rest of the Verka scientists could comprehend. Ben Carter had just prevented a full system failure with nothing more than a wrench and a casual attitude, as if saving a multi-billion credit research station was the same as tightening a loose pipe. Ben, however, didn't seem to notice the growing unease in the room. He simply wiped his hands on his jumpsuit and gave a small yawn. All right, that should do it. No need to panic, folks. Xyloth's frills twitched in pure disbelief. No need to panic. Do you realize what almost happened, human? Ben tilted his head. Yeah, something broke. I fixed it. No big deal. The room was dead silent. It wasn't just that the system nearly failed. It wasn't just that their calculations predicted a 94% chance of catastrophic failure. It was that, in the face of all this, Ben remained completely unfazed. Why? Dr. Zyloth narrowed his eyes. I believe we require further study. Later, in the observation room. The Xenovis Research Center was a place of strict protocol and scientific precision. The Verka prided themselves on their methodical nature, their ability to predict and calculate every possible outcome. Which was why Ben Carter made no sense. Zyloth watched him from behind a reinforced observation window. The human sat in the middle of a large chamber, feet propped up, chewing on a snack bar, completely relaxed. This was unnatural. The Verka had studied hundreds of species across the galaxy, testing how they responded to stress, panic, and disaster. Most species had predictable reactions. The Korvax froze when overwhelmed by too many variables. The Trivlorians screamed and fled. The Dravthul tried to fight. But humans? Humans laughed. They made jokes. They sighed. They rolled their eyes in the face of disaster. And they survived. The next experiment, a controlled crisis. Initiate the simulation, Zyloth commanded. A hidden console beeped. Inside the chamber, Ben blinked as the lights flickered, then turned red. A low, ominous siren began to wail. A booming voice echoed over the speakers. Police car light warning, atmospheric breach detected. Oxygen levels falling. Police car light. Thick, white smoke hissed from the walls, simulating a deadly leak. The Verka scientists watched with interest. Any other species would immediately react in one of three ways. Panic and scream. Run for the emergency exits. Try to physically stop the leak. But Ben? He took another bite of his snack bar. The scientists stared. Ben glanced at the warning lights, then sighed. He got up, stretched, and casually walked over to the control panel. He tapped a few buttons and turned a valve. The sirens shut off. The smoke dissipated. The emergency had been neutralized in less than 15 seconds. Ben yawned. All right, is this some kind of drill? 'Cause that was weak. The Verka did not speak. Their calculations had not accounted for this. This was not normal. Zyloth clawed at his data tablet, trying to make sense of the numbers. Ben's heart rate had barely changed. No signs of panic. No hesitation. No fear. This was impossible. A frightening revelation. Zyloth turned to his assistant, Dr. Virak. His voice was barely a whisper. We need to run another test. Virak hesitated. Sir, the data suggests humans have an abnormal threshold for stress. Perhaps we should consult. No, Zyloth cut him off, eyes gleaming. We need to know how far this goes. Virak gulped. The next test, real emergency. This time, the test would be different. They would make the emergency seem real. They would remove Ben's access to the controls. They would push the human to his absolute limits. Dr. Zyloth smiled darkly. Let's see what truly terrifies a human. Inside the test chamber. Ben cracked his knuckles. The lights turned blood red. Police car light warning, system failure. Multiple breaches detected. Evacuation required. Police car light. This time, the chamber shook violently. Sparks exploded from the ceiling. The floor panels shuddered as if the entire station were collapsing. Ben raised an eyebrow. Then, he rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. This is fake, right? Zyloth smirked from the control room. Let's see if you're still calm now, human. The test chamber shook again, this time with enough force to make Ben stumble. Smoke poured from the vents. A countdown appeared on the wall. T-minus 60 seconds until station implosion. The aliens watched in anticipation. Ben squinted at the countdown. 60 seconds? Seriously? Do you guys always give yourself this much time in an emergency? No wonder you panic so much. The Verka stiffened. Ben walked toward the door. It was locked. Xyloth leaned forward. What will you do now, human? Ben sighed, cracked his knuckles, and picked up a chair. The aliens watched in horror. With zero hesitation, Ben swung the chair straight into the control panel. Glass shattered. Sparks flew. A moment later, the doors slid open. Ben strolled out as if nothing happened. He stretched his arms. All right, I'm gonna grab some coffee. You guys are terrible at this whole stress test thing. The Verka stared in pure, absolute terror. Dr. Xyloth whispered under his breath. By the void, what are humans? By the void, what are humans? Dr. Xyloth's whisper went unheard by his team, but the thought lingered like a shadow in his mind. This was supposed to be a controlled experiment, a test designed to push human limits. Instead, the human had broken the test itself. Ben Carter had ignored the countdown. He had bypassed the security lock. And worst of all, he looked bored doing it. The Verka scientists had spent years studying how different species responded to crises. Their models were based on logic, statistics, and rationality. But Ben Carter? He acted like none of those things mattered. He had broken their system. And now, the Verka were afraid. The Council demands answers. A hushed meeting took place in the Xenovis Command Hall, a vast, dimly lit chamber where the elders of the Verka scientific order convened. Dr. Xyloth stood at the center, his frills twitching as he played back the footage of Ben's actions. The alien elders, draped in ceremonial robes of deep blue and gold, watched in stunned silence. Finally, one of them spoke. Elder Korok leaned forward, his amber eyes narrowing. You are telling me that a mere human, faced with imminent destruction, simply walked out? Xyloth nodded, his voice tight. Not only that, Elder. He destroyed our control panel without hesitation. He acted as if he already knew he would survive. A murmur spread through the chamber. Elder Vrick hissed. That is not possible. We ran the simulations 1,000 times. No species should react this way. Xyloth's frills twitched. Exactly. Which is why I believe humans might be hiding something. The murmurs grew into full-blown whispers of paranoia. The Verka were scientists, but they were also a species that feared the unknown. They controlled their universe through knowledge, through data, through calculation. But humans refused to be predicted. And that terrified them. An unnatural ability? Dr. Xyloth made a chilling proposal. We must investigate whether humans are interfering with probability. The room fell silent. Elder Korok narrowed his eyes. Explain. Xyloth tapped his console, pulling up recorded data from previous human encounters. Case number 1, a human starship pilot survived a direct collision with an asteroid that should have vaporized his craft. When interviewed, the pilot simply laughed and said, "Got lucky." Case number 2, a human soldier dodged a plasma blast at point-blank range. Witnesses described it as pure instinct. Case number 3, a human child fell from a cliff and survived with minor injuries. When asked how he managed to twist mid-air to land in a way that minimized damage, the child shrugged and said, "Dunno, just felt right." The common factor? Humans acted as if reality bent to their will. The whoops effect theory. Dr. Xyloth paced before the elders. We have always believed that probability is an immutable force, that survival is dictated by skill, intelligence, or preparation. His voice dropped to a whisper. But humans seem to introduce chaos into probability itself. The elders stiffened. Xyloth turned to the screen, where Ben Carter was displayed mid-yawn, sipping a cup of coffee, utterly unbothered. They joke in the face of disaster. They act as if failure is an inconvenience, not a threat. They embrace uncertainty as if they are immune to consequence. He paused. Then, he pointed to the moment Ben said, "Whoops." What if this is not simple human arrogance? What if "whoops" is a manifestation of their unnatural ability to warp probability? The room erupted in panic. The fear spreads. Xyloth's words sent shockwaves through the council. Elder Vrick whispered in horror. "You mean to suggest that humans can alter the very fabric of chance?" Another elder spoke. "They are either the most dangerous species in the galaxy, or the luckiest." Xyloth clenched his fists. "I refuse to believe in luck. There must be a mechanism behind this. And we need to find it." A new fear took hold of the Verka. For the first time in their history, they were faced with a species they could not quantify. A species that defied every law of probability. And worst of all, the humans didn't even seem to realize they were doing it. Ben notices the tension. Meanwhile, Ben Carter had no idea he had become the most feared man on the station. He just knew that the aliens were acting really weird. Whenever he walked into a room, conversations stopped. Whenever he reached for something, Verka flinched. Some of them whispered when they thought he wasn't listening. Finally, during a lunch break in the cafeteria, Ben turned to one of the researchers, a young Verka named Lorik. Ben raised an eyebrow. "All right, what's up with you guys? You're looking at me like I'm some kinda cryptid." Lorik hesitated, then blurted out, "Are you manipulating the universe?" Ben almost choked on his drink. "What?" Lorik leaned in, whispering. "We saw the data. You don't react to danger like any known species. You walk into catastrophe and emerge unharmed. You defy probability." "How?" Ben blinked. Then, he burst out laughing. "Oh man, you guys are serious? Dude, we're not magic. We just roll with it." Lorik's frills twitched. "Roll with what?" Ben shrugged. "Whatever happens. You mess up, you fix it. You get in trouble, you work your way out. That's just how humans are." Lorik stared at him. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "That is the most terrifying thing I have ever heard. That is the most terrifying thing I have ever heard." Lorik's words echoed in Ben's mind long after their conversation ended. Something was off about the Verka. They were usually calm, collected, obsessed with details. But now? They were acting like Ben had just kicked a hole in reality. Everywhere he went, the aliens stared at him. He caught whispers in the hallways. Probability anomaly. Reality disruption. Unpredictable. It was weird. And frankly, Ben was getting a little tired of it. The Council's ultimate decision. Meanwhile, in the Xenovis Command Hall, the Verka High Council gathered once more. Elder Korik's voice was low and grim. "We must consider the possibility that humans are a galactic anomaly." Dr. Xyloth stepped forward, his voice firm. "We cannot afford to ignore this. Humans do not react like other species. We have seen it firsthand." He tapped his data tablet. Ben Carter's test footage played again. The casual shrug in the face of system failure. The boredom during the simulated station collapse. The reckless but effective way he bypassed security. Xyloth turned to the council. He never panicked. Not once. The council murmured. Elder Vrick hissed. "That means one of two things: either humans are incapable of fear, or they know something we don't." A heavy silence fell. Then, Elder Korak spoke again. We must test him one last time. No simulations. No controlled environments. A real crisis. Let us see what happens when a human is pushed beyond his limits. Xyloth's frills twitched. He had been waiting for this moment. It was time to break Ben Carter. The unplanned emergency. The plan was simple: shut down the Xenovis primary systems, simulate a life-threatening failure, and monitor how Ben reacts. No warnings. No explanations. This time, they wouldn't just observe. They would let the station itself push him to the brink. Xyloth activated the sequence. Inside the station. Ben had just sat down in the engineering bay, sipping a cup of hot coffee, when suddenly. Police car light warning, total system failure detected. Police car light. The station lurched violently. The lights flickered, then cut out. The hum of the engines died. The artificial gravity glitched, making the room lurch as objects floated, then slammed back down. For the first time since Ben had arrived, something actually felt wrong. He set his coffee down. Huh. That's new. The emergency speakers crackled to life. Police car light gravity core unstable. Collapse imminent. Police car light. A sharp metallic groan filled the station. The floors shuddered. Sparks flew from the overhead wiring. Ben raised an eyebrow. Okay. That's bad. The Verka watch in silence. Behind a reinforced observation window, Dr. Xyloth and the scientists watched closely. Now, we will see the truth, Xyloth murmured. The crisis was real. This was no simulation. Would Ben finally show fear? Would he break? Ben's response, completely unexpected. Ben looked around. He tapped his communicator. Hey, anyone there? Silence. No response. He scratched his head. Then, instead of panicking, he whistled. Loud. Then he clapped his hands together. All right, let's get to work. The aliens watching stiffened. Why wasn't he scared? The human starts fixing the problem. Casually. Ben walked over to the nearest control panel, yanked off a maintenance hatch, and peered inside. The gravity stabilizer was overheating. Badly. He sighed. Should have known. These systems are way too centralized. The station shuddered again. A deep rumble vibrated through the floor. Police car light 30 seconds until system collapse. Police car light. Dr. Xyloth leaned forward, eyes wide. Come on, human. Let's see you panic now. Ben? He just rolled up his sleeves. He grabbed a hydrospanner from his tool belt and jammed it into the overheating stabilizer. The warning screen flickered. The countdown stopped. The danger was gone. Just like that. Ben dusted off his hands. Too easy. The Verka's terrified realization. The observation room was dead silent. Dr. Xyloth felt cold. The human had done it again. Not only had he solved the crisis in seconds, but he had treated it like it was just another Tuesday. Xyloth whispered. He wasn't even worried. Elder Korak slowly sank into his chair. The worst part is, I don't think he realizes how unnatural he is. Elder Vrick clutched his robe. This is no ordinary species. This is something else entirely. Fear spread through the council like wildfire. Ben notices the observation window. As Ben was packing up his tools, he finally noticed the row of aliens watching him. He raised a hand. Oh hey, guys. The Verka flinched. Ben frowned. Wait a sec. Were you watching me this whole time? Silence. The entire council stared at him. Ben blinked. Oh. This was a test, wasn't it? More silence. Ben sighed. Guys, come on. You really think a little system's failure is enough to scare a human? Xyloth felt his stomach drop. A little system's failure? Ben stretched his arms and grinned. Listen, I grew up in a city where my car caught fire twice in 1 month, and my boss still expected me at work. You think this is stressful? Nah. This is just another Tuesday. The Verka panicked. They thought this was a crisis. Humans thought it was an inconvenience. By the void, Elder Korok whispered. They are not bound by fear at all. By the void, they are not bound by fear at all. Elder Korok's voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of his words crushed the room in silence. The Xenovis Council, once a gathering of the most intelligent minds in the galaxy, now sat in complete dread. Humans were not merely adaptable. Humans were not merely lucky. Humans were something else entirely. A species without fear. Xyloth's final hypothesis. Dr. Xyloth stood, his posture stiff, his mind racing. For years, he had believed that survival was dictated by probability, intelligence, and physical capabilities. Every species had its strengths and weaknesses, its natural limits. But humans? They refused to acknowledge limits at all. They should not exist, Xyloth murmured. The other elders turned to him. Explain, Elder Vrick demanded. Xyloth swallowed hard, choosing his words carefully. Our entire understanding of life is built upon survival instincts, he said. Creatures freeze in danger. They flee. They fight. But humans. He turned toward the massive viewing window, where, below, Ben Carter was casually fixing another broken console, whistling a tune. Humans do not react to threats the way other species do. Xyloth paused the footage of Ben working on the gravity stabilizer from earlier. He pointed to the screen. Look at him. The system told him he had 30 seconds to live. The station was falling apart. And yet, he didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate odds. He didn't even look concerned. He just acted. The elders shuddered. Xyloth clenched his fists. I believe humans are not immune to fear. They simply ignore it. The council's reaction. Elder Korok leaned forward. You suggest that fear has no hold over them? Xyloth nodded slowly. It's worse than that. They recognize fear, but instead of letting it control them, they override it. They move forward anyway. He took a deep breath before delivering the final, terrifying conclusion. Humans are not a species of survival. They are a species of defiance. The council sat in horrified silence. They had spent centuries studying how creatures across the galaxy evolved. Every life form respected fear. It was biological law. But humans? Humans laughed in the face of it. Elder Vrick trembled. If they are not bound by fear, that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Ben notices the paranoia. Ben Carter had no idea the Verka Council had just classified his species as a universal anomaly. All he knew was that people were acting even weirder than before. The station was fully operational again, but every time he walked past a group of Verka scientists, they flinched. Conversation stopped. Some of them took notes when they thought he wasn't looking. Even Dr. Xyloth, the usually smug scientist, seemed nervous around him now. Ben sighed. Finally, in the cafeteria, he confronted Lorik, the only alien who didn't seem terrified of him. Ben took a seat across from him. All right. Spill it. Why is everyone looking at me like I just grew a second head? Lorik hesitated. The council believes you are unnatural. Ben raised an eyebrow. Yeah. And? Lorik leaned in, lowering his voice. They think humans ignore probability itself. Ben blinked. Huh. Lorik whispered urgently. They believe you defy the laws of the universe. That you refuse to acknowledge danger. That you cannot be controlled. Ben frowned. Then, after a moment, he laughed. Lorik recoiled. Why are you laughing? Ben wiped a tear from his eye. Dude. That's just called being human. Lorik stared. So you admit it? You really do ignore fear? Ben shrugged. No, we don't ignore it. We just don't let it stop us. Lorik whispered. That is the most terrifying thing I have ever heard. A real, unscripted disaster strikes. Before Lorik could respond, the station shook violently. Police car light alert, unknown object detected. Impact imminent. Police car light. Red lights flashed across the room. Scientists scrambled. The station's warning system screeched across the intercoms. Police car light warning, hostile object on collision course. Police car light. Dr. Xyloth's voice crackled over the comms. This is not a drill. We have a real emergency. All hands to battle stations. Lorik froze. His skin paled. Something is coming. Ben finished his coffee and stood up. Cool. Where's the problem? Lorik gawked at him. Did you not hear me? Something is coming. Ben cracked his knuckles. Yeah, I heard you. So, let's fix it. Police car light warning, hostile object on collision course. Police car light. The Xenovis shook violently as red emergency lights flashed across the station. Scientists scrambled in every direction, their voices rising in pure panic. Dr. Xyloth's voice cracked over the intercom. Impact in 3 minutes. We have no countermeasures. The Verka Council, normally so composed, had devolved into chaos. They had spent years preparing for any possible event. And yet, they had no plan for this. Ben Carter's response, completely unexpected. Ben Carter sipped his coffee. He watched the chaos unfold with mild amusement. Lorik, his alien companion, stared at him in horror. Why are you not afraid? Ben stretched. Because panicking doesn't solve anything. The aliens around him froze. Ben turned to Lorik. Alright, let's break this down. What exactly is heading toward us? Lorik's hands trembled as he checked his datapad. It's an unidentified object, moving at high velocity. It wasn't detected until just now. Ben nodded. Okay. Any readings on its mass? Lorik's eyes widened. You're analyzing the threat? Ben smirked. Buddy, if I freaked out every time something tried to kill me, I'd never get anything done. Dr. Xyloth's final attempt. In the control center, Dr. Xyloth was losing his mind. Redirect all power to shields, he barked. We can't, a technician screamed. The system is still recovering from the last event. Then evacuate the lower decks. No time. The realization hit Xyloth like a thunderbolt. They were out of options. The unstoppable force was about to meet an unmovable fate. And the only human on board was still drinking coffee. Xyloth turned to the monitors. Ben Carter. The anomaly. The unpredictable variable. And then, against all logic, against all reason, Xyloth made a decision. He activated his comms. Human. Ben raised an eyebrow. Sup? Xyloth hesitated. Then, in a voice he never thought he'd use, he said. Can you fix this? Ben takes control. Ben grinned. Now you're speaking my language. He cracked his knuckles and motioned to Lorik. Pull up the station schematics. Show me where the impact is gonna hit. Lorik, still reeling, scrambled to comply. Ben looked at the numbers. Fast. Heavy. Inbound in 90 seconds. He whistled. Oof. That's a problem. Xyloth nearly screamed. We know it's a problem. Fix it. Ben grinned. Relax. I got this. The crazy human plan. Ben scanned the power grid map and grinned. Alright, here's the deal. We can't stop it, right? Xyloth growled. Obviously. Ben clapped his hands together. So, let's not stop it. Silence. Lorik gulped. What? Ben grabbed a spanner wrench and sprinted toward a control panel. We can't stop the object, but we can redirect the impact. Xyloth froze. That's insane. Ben laughed. Yeah. But it'll work. The final seconds. Police car light impact in 30 seconds. Police car light. Ben rewired the station's emergency power circuits.